Hey James. Hey James.
Hey, hello.
Sorry about that. I took my daughter to school and there were two accidents on the road.
Oh,
So yeah, time consuming.
it
Sorry.
is. It can be. Yeah.
What'd you
Well,
say?
hopefully you're okay. Everything's okay.
Oh
So
yeah, I'm fine. It was just a lot of it was a lot of congestion. So
no problems.
and we have everybody joining in, so that's good. Nice
James, you have to condense it even more, James.
Yeah,
James,
right.
Yeah, you'll be all right.
James and James. Hi Very. I see Very's there and Lynn. All right. So we have about 19 people. Should we just go ahead and get started?
Yeah, let's get going. It's five
Sure,
past the
yeah.
hour.
Okay, cool. Sounds good. Hi, everyone. Sorry for the lateness. Um, but we're going to go ahead and kick off this month's Sugar Market Academy. James Andrews will be our subject matter expert. I'll let him introduce himself. And today we're going to be discussing, James, can you go back to the page? We'll be discussing, can you go back to the first page? Navigating leads and contacts between nurtures. So James, I'll let you go ahead and kick it off. But before we get started, if you have any questions, please feel free to add your questions in the chat. I'm sorry, Q&A, as the chat functionality does not work.
And
Okay.
I'm on hand to answer your questions. This is James Brown. I'm on hand. So many questions you have in Q&A, and I will get back to you ASAP.
Awesome. And we're recording. Okay. Take it away, James Andrews.
Okay, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining today. So my name is James Andrews. I'm a CRM application specialist and I worked on the sugar market team for around 3 years. So I'll be your subject matter expert today. Okay, so the first thing that I want to look at is the buyer's journey. Then we're going to dive into some ways to navigate in sugar market, and we'll actually dive into sugar market to have a look at some of those options. And then I have prepared 5 use cases which we'll look at. So hopefully the goal is to give you some ideas on how you can use not only nurtures but move people between those nurtures. And then there'll be some resources at the end. Okay, so I wanted to start by looking at the buyer's journey. So this will help us to decide when it's time to move forward in our nurtures, when it's time to, send someone into a different nurture. So what is the buyer's journey? So if you're in marketing, you are probably familiar with this. The buyer's journey is a 3-stage, process whereby we have awareness, consideration, and decision phases. So the awareness phase is typically, where you would refer to someone as a cold lead. They are looking and researching, trying to understand, the problem or issue that they've run into. And this is where, their first interaction with you comes, because they will be looking, maybe it's through Google search engine, maybe they come across you online or paid advertising, social media, whatever it is, right? They are looking to solve a problem. So this is where we can deliver really, top of the funnel content where we introduce our company, we share some really sort of important resources like white papers, blog posts, educational content, that sort of stuff. They then move into the phase of consideration. So this is where they become solution aware. So this is where they understand, that they need a particular product or service to help them with their problem. And this is where you can be much more focused around what you deliver. So you can highlight, your solution to the problem, showcase benefits, demonstrate ratings and reviews here, and share client success stories. You can also sort of offer samples or free consultations depending on your business, right? Not everyone can offer that, but if you're a product sample, if you're service based, free consultation. And then finally, and this is I guess the last stage before they move into being a customer, is the decision phase. So this is where we would typically, from a marketing perspective, consider someone as a hot lead, right? They are coming to the point where they are deciding their provider and they are going to purchase. So this is where we can really sort of start to deliver very conversion focused content. We share things like case studies, testimonials that are relevant to what they're interested in, and offer those limited time offers or incentives to help them get across that line to becoming a customer. I've included on the right hand side just a part here for post sale, because that is obviously a very important part of nurtures. You know, continuing to communicate with customers once they have purchased is very important. So the 3 stages on the left, we're focused on leads, and on the right, we're focused on customers and retention. So I just wanted to introduce this, and the reason for that is because if we consider this when we're building our nurtures and we are building our processes, it really helps us to decide when that trigger point is for us to move them through this process. And of course, deliver the right content at the right time. Okay, so I'll be referring to this buyer's journey as we go through and when we look at those use cases, and I have a use case for each of these 3 stages. Okay, so switching over to Sugar Market, how do we go about navigating leads and contacts? So we have many options at our disposal in Sugar Market. So of course we have forms, and there's many things we can do with forms. We can update someone's preferences. We can use conditions and actions to actually trigger people into a nurture sequence, or we can just simply add and remove people from a distribution list and decide whether we want to push that information into our CRM if we have one connected. So we'll have a look at, these conditions and from the form and how we can actually use the form as a mechanism to get people into our, our drip campaigns and move them through the process. Within our nurtures, we have things like being able to remove people from lists, helping us to organize those records and decide how they move through the process. We have conditional elements to help us evaluate engagement. And we have a jump to nurture option as well for when we decide that they should be moving on in the process. So we're going to look at all of these kind of options. And then there are many sort of other ways in which we can use scoring actions to also trigger people into nurtures. We can use distribution lists, preference lists, and custom reports to feed our nurtures. So based on people's information, we can sort them into lists, and that will help us to get the right content out. Dynamic distribution lists. So this is a really key one for if you're using CRM. You're able to create reports based on your data in CRM and sync that information into Sugar Market. And these dynamic distribution lists can help to feed our nurtures. So this is really great for particularly for that post sale that I mentioned. So if I just go back to sales, so here post sales, because we can build reports in our CRM when someone makes a purchase, and then that can help to add to our nurture sequences at the right time. And then finally, you may or may not be familiar, but we have listeners in the system. So listeners, we'll cover this briefly in this session, but listeners help us to execute actions such as adding someone to a nurture based on changes to data. So if someone's field changes, we might want to then trigger someone into a nurture based on that change.
So really what we're looking at here, I guess, James, is all the options you've got for navigating records around, putting them into nurtures, moving them around nurtures, and doing extra evaluation while they're in there as well.
Right. Yeah. So these are just all of the the possibilities, right? So we're going to drill down particularly on the conditional elements within nurtures, because this is one of the key ways in which we can decide what path someone will move down. So we have a few ways within a nurture to basically split the path. So we can evaluate link clicks, form completions, web page hits, so what pages they visit on your website if you have that tracked. We can evaluate certain field data. So are they in a particular industry, for example? Are they a contact versus a lead? And then we have list checker, so we can actually check, are they present in a particular list? So we'll look at this when we jump into Sugarmarket in a bit more. But really, these conditional elements within nurtures help you to evaluate interactions that are happening. To help sort of, I guess, support that and sort of those pathways and deliver the right content, we also have something in Sugarmarket called segments, which are used for dynamic content. So dynamic content is where we present a different piece of text, button, or images based on the data we hold in the system. So this can be used really well in conjunction with conditional elements to make sure you are getting the right information to people at the right time, depending on, for example, their job title. And I've got an example here on the right-hand side. So I just did this based on manufacturing. So we've got supply chain managers in the United States. So I've built a segment here with a filter that says they are a contact and they have a job title equal to supply chain manager and their contact industry equals manufacturing. And then further down, another rule for they also have a country, United States. So dynamic content can be, used to your advantage within your nurtures, to get that the right content. Okay, so use cases. So I've got 5 examples for you here. So the first one, and this is kind of top of the funnel, the awareness stage that I mentioned in the buyer's journey. And we have a new subscriber. So someone that comes to our website, fills out a form and confirms that they would like to subscribe via our consent, opt-in. So the process for this use case is, they complete the submission. The form then sends a confirmation email to confirm that they have effectively opted in. If consent was provided, we then will add them to a preference list, and we'll have a look at this in a moment, via a form action, and then the subscriber is added to our nurture. And then that nurture will continue to deliver relevant content around what they have subscribed for. Okay, so I'm going to jump into Sugarmarket now. I'm going to have a look at this. So let me just switch screens. Okay, so what I've got prepared for you today is a form that I've built in Sugarmarket. So this is a typical form whereby someone would hit your website. Maybe this is on your website directly, or it's on a Sugarmarket landing page. They would fill out their details and consent to receiving marketing from you. Now this could be a newsletter sign-up form. In this case, I chose a free report download, a resource. So that sort of top of the funnel stuff, right? Your lead generation. So if someone consents here, and this is the key point, what we have available to us in Sugarmarket on this build step is we have the ability to add someone to a preference list. So what I've done in this case is we've got this option here, and on the left-hand side, we have basically mapped to a preference list. So this option within your form builder, and you may be familiar with this, you may not, but if you are familiar with it, right, you're probably using this already. If you're not, it's this email preferences option under your elements. So you can click and drag this in, and it will add a unsubscribe, subscribe option, and then you can come in and map this to one of your preference lists.
And the good news for everybody is, I think next month we're having a new form builder deep dive session. So you already know next month's topic.
Right, yeah, and this is something that was also in the existing form builder. So this is not something that is new. Obviously, it looks visually different, but this functionality was there previously as well. Okay, so just let's preference this. So once you've added in this option, and I'll just remove the one I did. what you can do here is basically select your preference list, and when someone submits this form, they will automatically drop into that preference list. And of course they would, if they're consented, that's when we want to make sure that they get added to a nurture. So I just want to show you now on our action step, which is our final step on the form builder, what we have here. So the first thing that we'll want to do as part of that, what I showed you on the slide, is we'll want to send a confirmation email, right? So this might be delivering our report download. It might be confirming their subscription to, a newsletter sign up, right? So we always want that email to go out. So we can set that here. However, what we may also want to happen is for someone to be added to a nurture. So what we can do here is we can use a condition and action. So what we've got here at the bottom is if consent to mailing, and if I click into this, equals I agree. So that's that subscription option we just added. If it is agree, then we want to add them to our nurture. So they always get the confirmation email, but if they have consent set to agree at time of submission, they'll be added to our nurture. And then what our nurture will do is it will send a drip campaign of emails, right? It will send emails over a period of time around whatever they have subscribed for. Okay, so what I wanted to look at here really for this new subscriber is, how we can then, navigate them depending on their information. So what I've dropped in here is an evaluation element. So this could be used in a number of ways, but in this case, I have used it to, this is one of our conditional elements. I've used it to decide, are they a lead, right? Because I want to know this person that's subscribed, are they a lead or are they a contact? If they're a contact, they're likely a customer already. So I've determined the path based on that in this case, and then I can deliver a different set of emails depending on whether they're a lead versus whether they are a contact. Because for my lead, this is where I want to be delivering that top of funnel stuff, right? So this is one way you can use this to sort of this conditional element to evaluate data that you hold. You might just have a new subscriber sequence though without an evaluation element, right? It just runs through those emails. Or you might have click evaluations where you kind of assess the engagement that's coming here. But this process for a new subscriber should be fairly straightforward. And what I did lower down is I actually added in another one. So I want to sort of emphasize the fact that these evaluations can be used continuously throughout your process to check certain things on the record to see if they've changed, right? Because while someone might be a lead at the time of entry, they may become a customer at some point, or they may change, details on their record, and you can evaluate that and decide whether or not you move them at that point.
Yeah, sales may make changes inside CRM to the record while they're running through a flow. So it's sometimes good to evaluate before you send, you send email 1, and maybe before you send email 2 or 3, you then evaluate the record again. Do they meet the same criteria? Should they really receive this next email? If yes, then you do send it. If no, then we stop or we move them to another nurture campaign altogether, because obviously the criteria for them being in this nurture has changed.
Exactly. And you can decide, for example, here, if we, rather than us, send them across to get different emails, you could actually evaluate. And if they don't meet the criteria anymore, you could use this jump to another nurture option to send them into a different nurture with more relevant content. So these evaluation elements are really good here. So like, for example, here, we can take this out and we can say, okay, well, if we evaluate here and they no longer meet the criteria for this nurture, which is they are a lead, then we can send them into another nurture. So that's just one example.
Yeah, I use them a lot with customers, these evaluations, just because they want to automate certain processes and certain nurtures in here. And having these kind of evaluation steps just prevents a lead or a record from receiving content they shouldn't, be based on changes that are happening to the record in CRM that as a marketing person, you may not see because it's on the sales side on there. But keeping these actions in here will help you to make sure you've got relevant marketing content being sent to the lead or contact, whoever it may be.
Yeah,
Sorry,
and,
James.
and with
There you
these
go.
with these jump to another nurture elements, you can edit them and you can actually jump them to obviously a different nurture, but you can decide exactly where within that nurture. So you can actually jump to a specific step. So you can be really granular with this. You can select a specific step, and this will be dependent on the label that you set. So just make sure when you're building your nurture, you set the label so it makes it very easy here for you to jump to the right step. Okay, so I just wanted to also look at the recipients tab here because we're feeding this nurture from the form. So when someone submits the form, we don't have an include list, but what we do have here is an exclude list. So what we can do here is we can actually use our preference list that they dropped into to our advantage here, and we can actually put that as an exclude, make sure that we set this to opt out, and then have this auto refresh on an hourly, daily, or weekly basis. So what this means is once the nurture is published and someone flows into this from a form submission, if they ever modify their preference to say that they now want to opt out of that original opted in list, they would actually no longer receive emails on this nurture because we have set this to auto refresh. So the nurture is constantly checking back whatever we set here. So in my case, hourly, to our preference list. And then I have set here opt out specifically. So it's anyone that opts out of this preference list would then be excluded. And when we talk about exclusion, we mean, they can no longer receive any of the emails that are in this sequence. So this is one way in which you can use exclusion lists to prevent people from continuing to move for a nurture based on their criteria. But you could do this, we're using a preference list in this case, but you could use a dynamic distribution list also as an exclusion list, for example.
Or even another nurture on there.
Or even another nurture, right? So
Yeah.
I have that function in one of our other use cases. We'll have a look at that. But just to sort of explain that, here when you're selecting your list, you can select nurture. So if you want to make sure that if someone is in another nurture, they don't get included in this one, you can select nurture here. You can pick a nurture from a published nurture from your list, and you can drag it in, put it here. And again, you can see the type is nurture, not preference. And you have the ability to add, how you want to exclude. So, but have they completed it? If they're still active, removed, or currently previously enrolled. So you have a few options there. So I'm going to jump back to my slide deck. So just to sort of summarize here, we looked at, a new subscriber, top of the funnel. They're joining your mailing list. They are being added to a preference list. They're being entered into the nurture, and then they're getting that ongoing content via emails that you have built in your nurture. And then, of course, if the subscriber opts out of that preference list at any point, they are being excluded from that nurture because we added that exclusion list, that preference list set to opt out. So that is our first use case. So if anyone has any questions on this, please do put a question in, and I'll get to them, or James will get to them as soon as possible. So I want to jump across to our second use case now. So I'm not going to jump into Sugarmarket for this one, but I just want to sort of explain this one. So this is more consideration phase based. So this is where, they are, if we scroll back to our first slide, they are solution aware. So they are aware of the product or service that they need. So this is where we can offer a consultation if we're a service-based business. So our trigger here would be the visitor fills out a form requesting a free consultation. So again, our form would be our trigger for this, right? If they fill out that free consultation form, we want to add them to our consultation nurture. And that nurture will send an email immediately after, thank them for requesting a consultation, give them an overview of what to expect, and include a calendar link for them to be able to schedule that call. Now that might be Calendly, you might be using Sugar to manage your calendars. Whatever that link is, you can have that pull in via a field, and add that into your email that goes out, so that they can easily click through to the calendar, book something in. And in the meantime, you might obviously continue to send some emails with that nurture. So I've got some examples here. One day later, you might then explain the services that you offer. So once they've requested the consultation, doesn't necessarily mean that they book in, right? There might be a time gap between that. But we still want to be keeping them engaged and trying to direct them through to actually book in the calendar if they don't. So we can use those evaluation elements to check that. And here, I've got email 3, 2 days later, send a reminder again to schedule that consultation if they haven't yet. So that's where we can sort of check again against, did they book into the calendar? And you could use a field to control that or decide that within your nurture. So we effectively have 2 pathways for this nurture. The pathway 1 is they book the consultation, great. Maybe they get added to a new distribution list and removed from this nurture, because if they booked, we don't need them to get this email a few days later. So you can use that. You can either use the remove from nurture function, or you could jump them to another nurture so that they're no longer in there. So there's a few options there. And then if the recipient doesn't book the consultation, we might wait 5 days for that to happen. And if they don't, then we just jump them onto a sort of ongoing drip campaign that delivers case studies and blog posts to keep them in the loop, right? Because just because they didn't book the consultation doesn't mean that they never will. So we need to have a way to either to keep them engaged, right? So it's just an example of, consideration phase, someone's booking a consultation, and then sort of following on from that, I've also got, when they come to that decision stage. So imagine that they do book in that consultation, right? They have a really positive meeting with the team. Business development could then come in and add them to a post-consultation nurture. So this might be directly in CRM, right? So within SugarSell, or whatever CRM you're using, they can add, if they're using SugarSell, they could use our customer journey window to add someone to the nurture directly from the CRM. So that could be a manual process of adding them to the nurture, or a report could be built so that they automatically drop into that report and therefore sync to a dynamic distribution list. So that dynamic distribution list I referenced previously can help to feed our nurture, right? So that would we would set that to auto refresh, and anyone new that falls into that report would fall into our distribution list, dynamic distribution list, and they will run through the process. So in this case, they've had a successful consultation, it went well, and then we're going to deliver some sort of follow-up, post-consultancy follow-up emails. So I've just put 3 examples here. First of all, you might thank them for their time on the consultation. You can use merge tags, so personalization within that email to sort of reference some details from the call if you've recorded that in your CRM. And then you might follow up, with some supporting information, case studies, testimonials. Remember, they're close to making a decision to purchase at this point. So we want to make sure that we're delivering them relevant content to what they've inquired about. And then 5 days later, we might have an evaluation conditional element that says, if there's no decision, they didn't purchase, then we'll offer them an incentive or an offer, or maybe a free trial, depending on what our business is. So that can help them to get across the line if they're having second thoughts, right? Or they haven't made a decision at this point. So again, we have a number of different things that can happen here. Path 1, they just, after the consultation, they make a purchase, right? And we can have a list, if they are a customer, they get pulled out from the nurture. So that would be, again, an exclusion list potentially. So that's just an example here. And then path two, if they don't become a customer, so they don't make a purchase, but they take out a free trial because we've sent that email to offer that then. So they would just continue through your nurture and continue to receive, emails there. And then finally, they don't take any action, right? They don't take up the free trial or the offer, and they don't make a purchase. Therefore, again, they would just continue to receive emails until they do. Or you could jump them to another nurture, like an ongoing nurture. So you have many options available to you, right? But I guess what I'm trying to get you to think about here is, where are they in the process, right? And when you're building out your nurtures, think about what is the trigger point for them moving to the next point, right, for you as a business. So I've given a couple of examples here, right, of consultation, right? That's an example. Might be a demo. Get a demo, right? If they get a demo, you might jump them to a different nurture based on them having that demo. Okay. So I want to, for this one, jump back into Sugar Market. So this is our welcome nurture for new customers. So this is post-sale. So they've made a purchase at this point. So our trigger would be their first purchase. And, an example I've put here is, when they make their first purchase, so in CRM, it might be that an opportunity is closed, one, and you update a field, and you can use that field to then enter them into a nurture from a dynamic distribution list. So Sugar Market would add the new customer to the welcome onboarding nurture via dynamic distribution list. The nurture would then deliver some emails. And the example I use here is you might want to onboard them to your customer portal. So those nurture emails that are going out, they can prompt them to log in for the first time or create an account with the customer portal, manage their invoices, and get access to some exclusive customer information. So welcome campaigns are obviously very common. So this is something that if you don't currently have a welcome campaign for new customers, it's something that you can hopefully easily get in place. And it doesn't have to be huge, right? It can just be a few emails to help them get the most out of the product or service that they have purchased. So I got it here again, pathway 1 and 2. The nurture continues to send information or emails, prompting them to sign up to the portal. If it is actioned, again, we'll have an evaluation there. So, that might be a form evaluation. If they complete that sign up to the portal, then we can remove them from the existing nurture and add them onto a tips and tricks nurture or loyalty program or whatever you want to do as a business. Okay, so I'm going to jump into Sugar Market here, and I don't have a specific nurture, that's exactly the same as what I've just described, but I just want to talk through this sort of welcome style nurture. And I've got 2 examples here of simple and more advanced. But if we jump into Sugar Market, I'll talk through that a bit more. Okay, so
1 second, James, just to say thank you to everybody for your questions coming to the Q&A. Hopefully you're understanding my answers on there. But yeah, keep the questions coming.
Yeah, and I do appreciate if you're new to Sugar Market and you're not familiar with nurtures, there might be some questions around that. Yeah. It's very hard to obviously know what level everyone's at here. But when it comes to nurtures, as I said, you can make them really simple. Like, they don't have to be super complex. These evaluation elements help you, but you can keep them simple. So in my example I've got on screen now, I've actually sort of built a more simple version of a nurture on this right-hand side. So someone's a new customer. We've added them to this nurture. So maybe the nurture just sends them some emails, right? It has an email, pause, a few days, send another email, and it's very simple, right? It just sends email, pauses, sends email, and continues until you've delivered all of the useful information to them for a new customer. And then you might, at the end of it, remove them from a list and then jump them onto an ongoing nurture or somewhere else, right? So it can be as simple as that, right? You just acknowledge that, them as a new customer and give them some useful information. But you can be a bit more advanced, right? So you can actually use these evaluation elements to start to understand how they're interacting with the content you're delivering. So in this example here, I'm using a lot more sort of evaluation elements through this process. So just to explain what you're seeing here, at the top, someone gets sent that first welcome email to say, thanks for becoming a new customer. And then we're evaluating, first of all, did they open that email? So if you're not familiar, in the nurture, we have this email open, and you can simply check, did they open a particular email, and how long do we want to wait for them to open that email? So we could maybe wait 5 days, for example. So we're waiting, waiting until they open the email. If they do open that email, we're then going to continue them down this path. But what I've got in this case is I've got a evaluation that says, did they not open the email? Well, then let's resend it, right? And then evaluate again. And if they then do, let's bring them back into the loop. So this is an example of how you can resend, especially if it's important information for new customers, right? Where you need to understand, did they open that? Did they interact with that? You might want to resend that content. So this is a sort of an example of how you can have a bit of a loop to resend that original email. And then if they do, they come back in. Now, if they don't interact, you might just want to remove them from the nurture at this point, right? As an example. But basically, we're evaluating at different stages, and we're coming through here. We've got a link evaluation here. Maybe we've got an important call to action in this email, such as that portal sign up, that we want them to click. And we're just moving through the process based on their interactions. So in this case down here, I'm using a form evaluation. So I'm checking, did they complete a form? If they did, I want to remove them from our original list. And maybe that is that sign up to portal form, right? So we're checking, did they sign up? Yes, they did. Okay, great. Let's remove them from the current list that they're in, add them to a new list, and then jump them to a different nurture. So we're coupling lots of different elements together and understanding, what they're interacting with our welcome campaign. So I'm sure there's probably some questions on this, but the crux of it is that we're using data that we have on the in this case contact/customer record, and we're using that data to add them to a welcome campaign. Whether that's through a dynamic distribution list or it's through a custom report that we built in Sugarmarket, there's a few ways to do that, but really we just need to understand when they become a customer for this to work. Okay.
You're okay for time, James? I haven't had to cough yet. You're okay.
Yeah, I think we're good. I've got a couple more use cases, but they're a bit smaller and hopefully just help to illustrate the sort of post sale. So we're not going to jump into Sugarmarket for these, but an example of post sale, you might have a retention or an ongoing nurture. It's again delivering service or tips. You might be requesting feedback. So one of the things that as a customer you should check in regularly with your customers and ask for feedback. Maybe ask for a review. Obviously, if you're using like Google reviews or something, you can prompt them to do that. You can cross-sell and upsell. So if you've got another service that is relevant to the product or service that they've purchased, then you can obviously include that as part of that campaign. So again, that might be highly dependent on that conditional element of evaluating a field, right? Do they have X service or that's relevant or related? Or are they in a particular industry whereby there might be a particular service that you offer that's relevant? And then, I've got another example here of an email in a retention campaign. If they're not interacting, you could, or they haven't purchased recently, you could send a "we missed you" email, or you could offer a loyalty offer, for them being a long-standing customer. So just an example of, some emails that you could include in a nurture campaign. And obviously this would be for an existing customers. So you don't necessarily need like a form or something like that as a trigger here. What you would have is just a list that you add to a nurture. So it could just be a standard distribution list that you add to a nurture and publish. And everyone starts to run through this ongoing retention campaign. And then finally, on the post-sale, we've also got re-engagement, right? Really important for those customers that become inactive or they stop purchasing from you. Maybe they made a purchase, 12 months ago, but they haven't purchased for a long time. You can run or create a nurture for those records. So in this case here, I've got a couple of triggers here. So the first one is customers not interacted with any marketing in 6 months or more. So we have a field in Sugarmarket called Sugarmarket last activity. You may be familiar with this
Sales Fusion
last activity. Yeah. That field records a date, and that date is the last time that they opened or clicked an email, landed on a landing page. It's last time that they interacted with you, and it stores that date. And then you can create a report that looks back and says, show me everyone that hasn't interacted within 6, 12, 24, whatever you need to do, right? So you could do that directly in Sugarmarket, or again, you could do that in CRM if you're syncing that information. So you have a few options there. And then the trigger 2 would be just the customer hasn't purchased in the last 6 months. So that probably would be a dynamic distribution list as the trigger for that. So what we would do in this case for our nurture, we notice you haven't interacted lately, maybe give them a special offer. You can send some educational emails with valuable resources and then give them maybe a last chance to come back. And if they don't, then either interact with you or make a purchase, you could then remove them from your mailing, right? Because the last thing we want to do is continue to send emails that people aren't reading or interacting with, so, it's not bad to remove people from nurtures, right? If they aren't continually interacting with you. And maybe, subsequent to that, you have a process whereby, someone picks up the phone and calls them, right? So this can just help to kick-start that process and, understand what people are, if they are interacting with you. And if they're not, then maybe you pass them over to sales to follow up with. You could even create a task in the CRM for them to action. So hopefully these kind of use cases I've run through give you sort of an idea of the different types of nurtures that you can run and the ways in which you can move between them. And I appreciate there's a lot here today, so sorry if I've overloaded you a bit, but just some final thoughts. So consider the buyer's journey and the key interactions that people make. This will really help you to navigate leads and contacts within Sugarmarket. Use those exclusion lists to your advantage, to make sure that people are only receiving emails that you want them to receive at that time. And then finally, there's a lot of possibilities here, but be creative, but try and keep things as simple as possible, right? There's no need to make things overly complicated. I probably did with this nurture here, right? It's probably overcomplicated, right? Maybe we don't need this, but this was just to give you an idea of the different evaluation elements you can use, right? This simple nurture here is also great, right? Delivers content and then moves them to another nurture, nice and simple. Okay, so that was kind of all of the content that I had to present. So does anyone have any questions that we haven't got to, James?
Yeah, we've had 4 come through so far. Very big questions as well. Not just what are nurtures. That's a big question, actually. So it could be anything you want them to be. But we do have 10 minutes left if anybody has questions. You watch Lynn. Lynn Lamash.
Yeah, has Lynn got any questions
Or insight or anything she wants to ask.
or insight? Yeah.
No
Main thing for me,
questions?
one of the main things I was going to say for me on this is just thinking about, obviously we want to move people to different nurtures and not have them be in multiple nurtures at the same time on there, because you can have several that are running. And I was trying to think of, well, use those conditional elements, use those, check in the CRM to make sure, should they still receive this? Use the exclusion list section to say, if they're in this nurture, don't exclude them from the other nurture in there, or use exclusion lists as well. That's the way you can manage who's in each nurture campaign and who's receiving the correct content. So using those two options is the main part from this.
Yeah, and you can always understand, like on an individual basis, what nurture someone's in by going to their contact or lead record and looking at the nurtures tab. It will tell you exactly, what nurture someone's part of. Or you can go to the nurture itself when it's published and search for a record and see exactly what path they've taken. So, if you need to understand like where they are in the process, that's the way to do it. And you'll be able to see, if you're evaluating, are my conditional elements, are they working? And you can sort of evolve over time with your nurtures and make tweaks to them.
And another example I've been working on with another customer is when leads come in with the status of new, they drop into the new nurture campaign on there. So they start getting, they receive a welcome email, for example. And then a few days later, it will send out another email. Before we send any email, the step before that is, let's check that status field again. Do they still have new in that field? If they don't have new, maybe the salesperson's been in touch. They're now in process, whatever it may be, whatever stage you may have, whatever status you may have. Well, really, if that's happened, they shouldn't receive email too, because they're no longer new. They're actually talking to somebody in sales. So that stops the email at that point. It just means that we can say, okay, don't send them anymore. And because the status has changed on there, it maybe drops them into a different nurture campaign. So that can be picked up elsewhere via a report, via a listener, puts them into a separate nurture campaign. Just means that as a marketing person, you can't keep your eye on what's going on all the time on the CRM side. So using that evaluation of a field means that we can prevent emails from sending if they shouldn't send to those records. And that's based on the status of a lead.
Yeah, that's a really good point, James. So like exclusion is just as important as inclusion, right? So like if someone in sales has marked the lead status as dead, for example, because they've picked up the phone and they've spoken to that person, and they know that they just aren't going to purchase, they've marked that status, then maybe that is reason to pull them out of, well, should be reason to pull them out of a nurture.
And yeah, Shara's writing. Yeah, we'll get the slides and recording to you. Shara will. But thank you, Lynn.
Yeah, we'll get the slides, and there is a resources tab on the slides as well that links out to our documentation, Sugar Club, and Sugar University. So that's on the slide deck as well.
And as you've already heard, I think next month we'll be looking into the new form builder. So I know it's only just released a couple of weeks ago, so we want our time to go in there, play around with it, but we're going to present the new form builder to you next month. Sneak peek into our future topics.
Yeah, and the new form builder, I didn't want to sort of look at it too much today, but it's hopefully much easier for people to use, and the UI is really consistent with the rest of the platform, like the email builder, landing page builder. You should see the similarities there.
Yeah, the ease of deployment, the ease of confirmation emails, things like that, and how to build the templates for those confirmation emails. That's what we'll show you on next month's session. I mean, don't hold back. Feel free to use it now, but we'll show you more in depth next month.
Yeah, so no more questions.
Oh, and that's it. And then over back to you, Shara, I think.
All righty. Well, I did add the link to SugarU where all of the webinar recordings and slides are. I will add today's recording shortly, but you can utilize that link to access that this recording from today and all past recordings.
Cool.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you everybody for your time and have a good day. This actually concludes the Sugar Market webinar for today.
Thank you everyone for joining.
Thank you, everybody.
Have
a great week.
Thanks. Bye-bye.